Hey friends, this is Chris from the garden. Some things have gone wrong this year. Some of it is 100% my fault. Some of it is very much not my fault. And some of it's a mixed bag. None of this is me saying that I'm giving up, because I'm not. And none of it is me trying to tell you that this is the best way to do things, because it's not. The takeaway from this video, I hope, will be that things will be better next year. So let's talk about what I could have done better this year. So the big setbacks this year that I can improve on next year are the flooding, the chaos sowing of the carrots, trying to do the living pathways without really having the time and energy to do living pathways, and honing in on my processes for starting seedlings and making the most efficient use of the greenhouse space and the grow light space. Let's look at these issues one by one. First, the flooding. Long story short, there was some construction across the street which redirected a ridiculous amount of water into my field. What you see here was my first attempt at a retention pond to try to slow this water down. So this is May 25th, and my retention pond is retaining a lot of water, but not enough. The water was greatly slowed down by all of this, which is a good step in the right direction. It's working. It's just not working as well as I need it to, because it's still carrying water down there, and you can see that there's still standing water down that way. My retention pond definitely stopped a whole bunch of water, because here it is. I mean, that's thousands of gallons of water right there. And so it definitely slowed stuff down right about here. And you can see that it then slowly moved through this field like so, dropping a whole bunch of debris as it went. So then this water, all the water that got to here, definitely went through and bypassed my retention pond. Some of it stuck around right here in a low spot. In this bed, I've got a row of corn planted, and it's probably not going to do anything. I was planning on planting another row here either tomorrow or today, so that I can get a good succession of corn going, so that it's a steady flow of corn. But that's going to be really difficult now. Knowing that I only needed one row of beans, I thought, okay, I'll dig a little drainage ditch here. This little ditch that I put in to stop the water stopped a good deal of it. And you can see right now that it is continuously flowing at this moment. You see that flow? It's flowing into this little ditch that I dug over here, so the water had somewhere to go. Water flows through here hard enough to uproot some of my onions. I thought that I had expanded everything well enough, and it looked like we were going to have a steady relief from excessive rains. It looked like we were getting into the dry part of the summer, actually. But then, on the evening of July 4th, we got more than 2 inches of rain all at once. The flooding was definitely not my fault, and the things that I did to try to prevent the damage from the flooding ended up taking my attention and my labor hours away from weed prevention. And frankly, I made a kind of dumb mistake that made the weed issue much worse. So let's look at that. Number 2, chaos sowing the carrots. I didn't have a seeder at the time.
I just put the seeds in my hand and kind of shook and let the seeds fall where they did. And then while I was very busy trying to keep the flooding out, the carrots got out of hand. Since I didn't use a seeder to evenly space them, and I didn't come through and thin them out later on, there's kind of this chaos jungle of mixed carrots and weeds in a lot of places.
So that last clip kind of demonstrates the problem number 2, the chaos sowing of the carrots, as well as problem number 3, the living pathways. Because I didn't have the adequate time and energy to maintain the living pathways properly, they really crowded out a lot of younger seedlings that then got stunted in their growth, or maybe didn't get enough airflow to avoid diseases, or maybe retained too much water and rotted for that reason. So, problem number 3, living pathways without the appropriate time and energy to manage them properly.
I went way too long without pulling these weeds around this tomato, and all these lower branches that it tried to make rotted. And so now, I mean, it's still alive, but boy, it's not thriving like it would have been had I been a little bit more on top of this. And you can see the ones next to it are the same way. It'll bounce back, but it just delays and decreases the yield. I'm putting a lot of time and effort into ridding this onion bed of weeds, but Jesus, there's a lot to do. And it's not good soil. You can't dig into it easily. And so pulling stuff up, especially trying to get all the roots, is just, in some cases, not even feasible, but in other cases, it's just very, very difficult.
And now for a solution to this problem.
So here you see I've got some straw down, and a few little weeds are poking through. That said, nowhere near as many weeds as I would have otherwise. And because I tilled this really thoroughly before putting the straw down, these weeds come up like a charm. They're just, all that's left of them is these little tiny shoots. And so I can just pull back the top covering here, find the root, and just pull it real quickly. But also underneath here, it is cool and moist, which really helps these plants that I've got here thrive. I intend to do this everywhere where it makes sense. That'll help hold in the right amount of moisture.
Now, what am I going to do for problem number 4? Preserving the best time and space in the greenhouse and under the grow lights to maximize efficiency.
This was a decent first go at a greenhouse that I completely designed myself and built with the help of some friends. Um, I know some improvements I want to make. For one thing, the roof is not pitched steeply enough. There are inevitable gaps between the panels, as you see here, and there's one over each of these beams. And so a little bit of water is going to get through. The way to keep that from dripping is for these beams to be more steeply pitched. So instead of like this, a little bit more like this. Not quite that dramatically, but you know. And so that will keep the water from dripping onto the trays, which did cause some flooding issues within the trays. Some of the seedlings got much more water than they actually needed and succumbed to root rot. When I pitch the roof a little bit higher, the top of it will probably be right about in line with this door frame here. And so I'll mount a box fan in there to pull in more cool air. And then I'll probably do the same thing over on this side. Because one issue that I had with this greenhouse this year is it just got too hot way too early in the season. And that cost me a lot of seedlings too. So just firming up these processes to make sure that I get the most efficient use out of the resources. I also need to work on my planning of greenhouse space and grow light space to make sure that I'm making the best use of it. In a lot of cases, I saw that it looked like there wasn't enough of something thriving out in the field, and then would, in a panic, be like, "Oh, I better start a whole bunch more of that," and then I have too much of it, as what happened with my onions this year. You see, I've got 9 or 10 trays of onions that just got wasted because I started them all in a panic and then just didn't have the room to put them out in the field. And now it's too late for two reasons. One, it's too late in the year, and two, these onions, well, they're dead now. So one thing I can really tighten up next year is my planning of what seeds I'm gonna start when and how many. As you can see here, I've got some broccoli started under these grow lights. And unlike what I did last year, these guys are all in one big 1020 tray together, no individual cells like I did previously. Starting things in cells, I had several duplicates or sometimes triplicates or more. And I also had several empty cells where nothing germinated. The empty cells were just kind of wasted space under the grow lights and in the greenhouse. And the duplicates and triplicates required a decent amount of work to separate them and make sure that they were okay after being separated. And then if I separated them within a week or so of transplant, it was kind of a double whammy of trauma for the plant that it just did not enjoy. So I want to minimize the number of times that I have to completely uproot these plants. I also want to start everything in trays like this, unless it's just completely infeasible to do so. Another practice that caused problems last year is I would transplant things at the wrong time. Last year, I had to start multiple relays of things when the ones that went out into the field failed. Transplanting broccoli before the 6th week leaves them vulnerable to cutworms because their stems are not yet thick enough to handle the trauma of being chewed on by a cutworm. Likewise, if I plant at the wrong time of day, or when the roots are dry, or the wrong time during the weather, then I can either get root rot issues or the plant can just fail to thrive in its new place. I have to be careful from now on to create the right conditions before, during, and after transplant. I'll need to do a lot less remediation and catch up if I just do it right the first time. There's going to be a good deal of food to come out of Deep Roots Farm this year. It's not a loss. I've got plenty of thriving plants, but boy, there's a lot that I can improve. And really recognizing that is a positive thing. Recognizing that it's already decent and it's going to get so much better next year that's a win. Yeah, I think that's a win. Mistakes only become failures if you don't learn from them, and I'm learning. Stay rooted, friends.